I don't think I've seen this many intestines in an animated show like ever. It's like the only other thing I can think of is, I don't know, maybe some of those kind of weird, like Japanese anime movies that I've seen, like Demon City or Wicked City or stuff, where it's like, that's the point, to see all the intestines and all the penises and all the boobs. I'm just like, wow, this, other than that, this definitely, I think, has the most just, animated intestines that I think I've ever seen. Even more than like something like Lily Cat, right? All right, my friends, we're going to go ahead and we're going to move on to the next part of my show. And that is my review for Invincible, Season 2, Episode 4, chat. And for those that don't know, they split Season 2 into 2 parts. I guess part 2 is going to come out sometime in 2024, sometime after the new year. I believe it's pretty soon. I think it's like January or something. So maybe they needed time to finish everything off. Or honestly, maybe it's a smart strategy. Just like, hey, get people to still like start talking about this show. And hey, you got your first 4 episodes, right? In episode 4, a lot of big things happen in it. A lot of, cataclysmic, horrific, sad, somber things happen this episode, which I'll detail in just a bit. But, to kind of keep people talking, into the new year. It's like, and here are the next 4 episodes. So I can understand the strategy. It's kind of smart, instead of like, dumping all at once or even week per week. It's like, yeah, we'll give you these episodes, but then you got to wait for the rest next year. Kind of start the new year off on a bang, if you will. So I don't know, maybe an effective strategy, or maybe it's a strategy they needed to employ because they haven't finished the episodes. We'll see. But in any case, for those that don't know, I've been really enjoying Invincible Season 2. I mean, I really enjoyed, the original season. I think I only had one complaint. I think some of the animation was, purposely, cheap looking because they wanted to save their budget for, bigger episodes, of course. But overall, I loved Season 1, and I am a big fan of the comic, as you guys may or may not know. And, Season 2, I think, has been very good, and I've actually liked a lot of the changes that they've made. They've certainly modernized the comic for the times, and they needed to, especially with some of the characters, which they kind of relegated to just being kind of secondary, tertiary characters, forgotten characters, plot devices. And so it's been great to see them kind of focus on people who got no focus originally in the comics. And plus, the comic now at this point is 20 yeof ago, so you gotta update some stuff. And I think for the most part, it's worked out very, very well, amazingly well. And for this specific episode, kind of the general background synopsis, while Mark is stunned to be confronted by his father, Omni-Man, on an alien world, Omni-Man reveals what he's been doing since leaving Earth. And the survivors of Nolan's rampage still struggle to put their lives back together. Now, getting into this episode, chat, I've already kind of told you like my overall thoughts so far on this season and, in the past season and the Invincible comic at this point. I want to talk about this episode because a lot of big things happen in it. And I love how it immediately picks up after Omni-Man left Earth in Season 1. And how he dealt with his guilt and struggles of betraying, his family. Like, it's that moment. So this would be a little spoilers, chat, for, the past 3 episodes, and obviously Season 1 at this point. But episode immediately starts after he literally beat the living hell out of his son, turned him into a bloody pulp, and Mark's just like, that? Doesn't even know if he's there. And, Nolan finally pausing, going, and just using them thick thighs to shoot himself up into the sky and flying around the cosmos. That was the last time we really saw him, like this version of Nolan. We've seen some different versions of Nolan in other universes, kind of how the season opened. But this is like, okay, now we're finally focusing on our Nolan, on our Omni-Man. And, the opening in this is brilliant, in my opinion, chat. Like, the animation and the music in the opening, I think, is exceptionally well done. And it captures the state of Omni-Man. It captures the state of Nolan's mind. He's listless. He's depressed, and he's racked with guilt. And and he has this inability to reconcile, like, his what he wants, but what his people want. And you get all of that in this opening, like, 5 minutes. And again, it's the backgrounds, the animation, because most of it is kind of focused on him just flying through space. We see this glorious backgrounds, Chad, of these decimated worlds and these dying stars and these suns and all this rich color. And I notice, like, for a lot of these scenes, because Omni-Man, he's such a large figure. He's across, the show. His presence is felt, even in the season, even though he's not in it a lot, right? And it was so interesting, like, how they showed him here. They show him as being this small little man in this giant cosmos, right? And it's like, because that's how he is right now. That's how he perceives himself, as small, as he's completely alone, as he's traveling in the vastness, the emptiness of space. It captures, I think, his mentality perfectly. And again, even though he's like this extremely powerful being that decimated the planet, that killed thousands, if not tens of thousands of people, that betrayed his wife, referred to as a pet, beat his son viciously after betraying him. I just loved how the opening painted him as this kind of small man running away, and he feels trapped by his own decisions. I thought that was a great choice. Was a great choice. I mean, and again, like in the comics, from what I remember, I don't know if they kind of hint at certain things that Nolan does after that, the events of his massacre on Earth. But there's all I'll say is there's this wonderful shot of him looking into a massive black hole, and he seems to be doing something. I was like, whoa, is that what we're dealing with here? I thought that was amazing. But then he kind of finds renewed purpose. There's a fantastic, I think, reveal in regards to Omni-Man's new life on this bug planet. Ends up saving some bug people, goes to their planet, right? And I love how, he is just attempting to, like, talk to Mark. And Mark's, and you know what? And I get it. Mark's not having any of it, nor should he have any of it. No doubt about that. But I'm really impressed by the performances of J.K. Simmons and Stephen Yeun in this episode. They express just a wide range of emotions within a single scene. I mean, anger, sadness, just joy of seeing each other, and they're trying to rectify that in themselves, right? Because so much has happened, and so many unforgivable things have happened, especially in regards to Nolan. That Mark doesn't know how to feel about his father anymore, and they're all kind of, even though there's there's spectacular animation in this episode. We're going to get to all that. Wonderful fight sequences, brutal fight sequences. But again, some of the best aspects of this show, and especially this season, is the conversations between characters. And I love the conversations between Mark and Omni-Man. And, especially with the complicated, nature of Omni-Man's relationship with this new world that he is now the emperor of. Although how he came to be emperor is not as brutal as one would have probably expected, especially knowing him. But also his relations to some of the people there, and how Mark is trying to just deal with that. He has a lot that's thrown on his plate, and he's struggling with that throughout the episode. Like, he was bamboozled. He thought he was going to a planet to rescue bug people. Turns out it was his dad tricking him. And they introduce something. I don't want to say what they introduce in this specific episode, but it is something that sets up a lot of great story beats, some really good drama, again, some really good conversations, but something that will no doubt have a huge impact on the rest of this season and what I imagine will be subsequent seasons in the future. There's a new element that's been added to Invincible. I'm thinking, like, this is going to be cool, and it's going to be controversial, and it's going to make people happy and also very upset. And I'm very excited to see how certain characters are going to react to this new element. And, as I said before, the animation and the battle scenes, I think, are in this episode are some of the best and the most brutal, probably since episode 8 of season 1. And also, again, huge shout out, Chad, to the Adam Eve special episode, which came out before season 2, which gave us a lot of background on Adam Eve as a character and her whole origins, which was really good. Very impressed. I've reviewed that. I've done audio review commentary for that. But even I noticed, like in the Adam Eve episode, that they really upped the ante with the animation here and the choreography and just the style of the fights. And the same is for this specific episode where, we do have other Viltrumite characters that introduced, and yes, Nolan and Mark do engage in battle with them, and I think that is like really, really cool. And again, it's kind of hard to watch in some cases. It's like, oh god, there is a lot of disemboweling, there's a lot of breaking of bones, there's a lot of tummy stabbing, a lot of tummy stabbing. If you got a tummy, you better cover that up because people are going to stab it. People are going to try to disembowel you. It's like, yeesh. I don't think I've seen this many intestines in an animated show, like, ever. And it's like the only other thing I can think of is, I don't know, maybe some of those kind of weird, like, Japanese anime movies that I've seen, like Demon City or Wicked City or stuff, where it's like, that's the point to see all the intestines and all the penises and all the boobs. I'm just like, wow, other than that, this definitely, I think, has the most just, animated intestines that I think I've ever seen. Even more than, like, something like Lily Cat, right? But outside of the amazing battles and the choreography and just how brutal and vicious it all is, it's really good. Again, one of the other big standouts of this episode, but also of this season, is Sandra Oh as Debbie Grayson. The wife of Omni-Man and the mother of Mark of Invincible. She is, again, getting so much more to do compared to her original comic book counterpart. And, she has some really heartfelt scenes in this episode, just processing her grief. And, and finally admitting to herself, and also Art, voiced by Mark Hamill. It's like, oh, Art, where you been? It's always great to see Mark Hamill in animated projects, that she is not fine and that she is in severe, horrible, emotional pain and distress. Because throughout these first 4 episodes, she's always like, I think the one thing she said across all of them, she's like, I'm fine. I'm feeling fine. I'm okay. We all know that she's not. And in each episode, she gets worse and worse and worse. And, what the comic book did, which was so frustrating, is that, I think Robert Kirkman, he struggled to write women. And I think they've addressed that, with this season. Because in the comic, she was just kind of relegated to being a tertiary character. She was just, they turned her into an alcoholic, and she was a wine mom, and that's all she was. That's pretty much all she was. And they did some other things with her after that, and I thought, this is not working either. But here, she's very much a 3-dimensional character, and she does have her own arc, and she has not even the moment where she finally admits that she's not doing well to someone who is a close personal friend, probably has had similar experiences to her in terms of, how they perceive Nolan, how they knew him. Like Art, Mark Hamill's character, he was like Nolan's best friend, honored best friend, quote unquote. And he was betrayed, and so he definitely has, I think, a better understanding of what Debbie is going through. Maybe with the exception, of course, of Mark, but out of everybody else in the show, everyone else still on Earth, like, he definitely has, the best inkling as to how she's actually feeling. And they have, I think, a wonderful conversation here. But even before then, like, she goes through like a Forrest Gump situation where she's traveling across the city just barefoot, listless, doesn't know what she wants to do, kind of implied that she wants to do something to herself. It was like, whoa, we going there? Okay. Very dark. I liked it, though. And then finally going to the grave of her husband, having a conversation with him there, trying to, like, speak her mind and trying to make sense of, like, why he did this to not only her and her son, but also to the planet. I was like, that's just horrible. And again, then later on, her conversation with Art, and finally realizing that, she has to, not only, move on for Mark, but also for herself. And I thought that was great. It's just so nice to see Sandra Oh just getting this character. And I'm just very happy with what they're doing with her, and that she's not being just relegated to being just a nothing character like in the original comic book. the ending, I mean, they were smart. They were very smart. You know, it is a great cliffhanger. They introduces us to a new character, voiced by Clancy Brown. I'm like, Clancy Brown's in this series. Who the hell is he playing? We find out who he's playing. I was like, very good choice, in my opinion. But they set up a number of things, and Mark is presented with a really terrible situation that he finds himself in. It's kind of like a no-win scenario. It's like, how am I going to get out of this? And so, yeah, how they kind of wrapped up at least this part one, I thought was very good. Because going into part two, it's going to get even more complicated, as it should. And also, I mean, the other thing is, Mark is never going back to college. It's just, that's not going to happen. They do kind of touch on a number of other characters, including like Amber and Adam Eve and like Mark's other friend whose name I forget off the top of my head. But like talking about his college career, it's just like, it ain't gonna happen. He's been like at this point like gone for a week. You know, they kind of set up like, oh, that's how long he's actually been gone for. And I'm like, yeah, you're not going to school, Mark, anytime soon. This is how can you? I do like that even in the original comic, but also here they kind of bring up the fact like, yeah, how can these superheroes, especially like kid superheroes, like go to school and live like normal lives and go to college? You just can't. You can't with all the things that are happening around the world, all these supervillains that are trying to kill you or torture you or kill off your loved ones and friends. It's just not possible. So, you know, I kind of like how they're bringing that up and saying, like, this is never going to work, which I thought was interesting. They have, like, another two other, like, plot lines. They're dealing with Adam Eve and how she's really struggling with, you know, she thought she was always in the right and with her powers, and she's helping the world. And, you know, she finds herself in a situation where she actually ends up endangering two people, and she's not dealing with that very well, and she actually probably goes back to a very toxic situation with her parents. I'm like, this is not going to play out well, but I'm excited to see how that's going to work. And then also Donald, good old Bobby Hill, chap. The character that looks like Bobby Hill from King of the Hill. You know, as we know, Donald died last season, but seemingly he's fine in season 2. And, you know, there's been like little clues that he's been gathering along the way. And after being confronted by Debbie, he was like, why are you here? You know, he's like, what do you mean? He's also dealing with his little existential crisis. And I kind of like that they focused on that with him. Because he was such a kind of tertiary nothing character in the original book. And he's kind of coming to the realization that he's not who he actually thinks he is. And how do you deal with that? Especially when the person you most trust in this world, which in this case is probably his boss, Cecil Stedman, played by Walton Goggins, who does such a great job, you know, who he's given so much loyalty to, has always followed his orders, is lying to him about what he probably actually is and seemingly doesn't care. Like, how are you going to rectify that? That's another little interesting, you know, additional plot line that they introduced in this episode. And I really like that too. But yeah, overall, this season so far, at least part 1 of season 2, I think has been very good. It's had a nice balance of course, you got all the humor, but it's all the character work, all these just vicious, graphic, you know, brutal scenes that are obviously very effective and get people talking. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's the thing that most impresses me about this show is the fact that it's written so well. And that the characters all come first. And that even Robert Kirkman, even he realized that he had to modernize and make updates to make these characters better. And that should be commended. I really respect that. So, and yeah, and again, I think season 2 has been great. This episode makes me even more excited for season 2, part 2. Can't wait for that, and I will definitely be doing reviews for that, and I'll definitely be doing audio commentaries for that as well. But what about you guys? What did you think of this episode, and what did you think of season 2 so far after these first 4 episodes? How are you feeling about it? Let me know.